the world has changed, and I think that the biggest mistake would be thinking that VCs are of a type or of a sort. Um, VCs are um, have very different types of backgrounds, and they could be technical, they could be financial. They come like me, we're from the media world. Um, Many of them were entrepreneurs, and that's probably the number one category of VCs. So as entrepreneurs, they're busy, but otherwise they totally get and understand what it was like to be that person at the germ of an idea and thinking about what you're doing. And we can characterize VCs as having, most people have a to-do list, they have a to-do wall that is so busy, and that wall becomes this blockade and it's hard to get their attention. But if you are with them, they're completely normal, and they do not want anyone, there's no emphasis on being salesy or hypey, or like all the caricatures are not actually the real thing. Like, I have to watch out myself, where if I go in, like, I'm on TV mode for a moment and I say things super succinctly and sharp because you only have a few minutes and otherwise you're going to get kicked off the show. It doesn't work in VC world. They don't respond to it. It's like it's something unnatural, but they just really want to talk. They just really want to talk. The most important thing to them is that they like you. They like you, like talking to you, and like working through ideas with you. And everybody, myself included, has had lots and lots of bad ideas before you strike on a good one. That is the nature of creative talent, from the sciences to the arts. Finding VCs who like you, like, one day you'll have a good idea and then everything will click. Every venture investor has their own way that they get comfortable with risk. In the phrase, in venture capital, we'll often use the phrase index, meaning an index means like it's a fancy way of saying, what we care more about. So we index to the founder. Well, that means that there's a lot of risk here, but I really believe this person has the chops to figure things out when things get bad. This investor indexes on the technology. Even if the founder quits, the technology is the inevitable technology. Sometime in the future, the world will decide this is the best, like powering a car with electricity, like that's inevitable. And that's the end game, and there won't be a technology beyond it. And therefore, they index on the technology. They can index on these different aspects of your story. They index on the business model. There's only 100 companies in the world that could buy this, and if we sell only 10 of them, 10 sales, we have $1 billion. They love that kind of model. Or they hate that model and they love the opposite, consumer stuff. But they find ways to get comfortable with the risk. They tell themselves a story in their head that makes something that's really risky seem less risky. And you have to kind of read that and understand it.
So you've taken your $10,000 and you've developed a prototype, and your prototype is a robot that makes pizzas, say, or it's a new synthetic biology process by which to make, peanut butter, or whatever it may be. So the question then is, where do you go next? Then the most natural place to go at that point with the prototype, but without any revenues, is to an accelerator that is willing to take a risk and put in, $100,000, 50, some accelerators $50,000, some accelerators $100,000, some accelerators like Hacks or IndieBio up to $250,000 on the first check. So and then what are you so for that additional amount of capital, you've gone from raising $20,000 or $10,000 from your family and friends to being able to raise a large amount of capital. You have to be able to show that you've de-risked the business so that an accelerator will be willing to take the risk on you, to say that you are in the top 1 or 2 or 3% of all the applicants. And the way that you show that is by having an exciting market and having a lot of hope about the development of that market, and but also having the concrete reality of what you've achieved in your business. So by developing these effective prototypes. You're talking about giving up a chunk, not a very large chunk, but a chunk of capital of your equity of your business to an accelerator, and hopefully being part of that community that accelerator develops around its startups for the rest of your entrepreneurial life. And so the question is, what does that accelerator offer to the founder? And the answer is that different accelerators offer different sorts of programs. There's some accelerators that are completely virtual programs, and in the time of COVID, that's kind of a necessity for many programs. But the greatest value is often when there is a very tight community that's established by physically co-locating into a workspace and a working community where you get to know and work with a lot of other like-minded entrepreneurs. So one of the reasons why at Hacks and at IndieBio, for example, what we do is we focus on these very deep tech areas with a lot of concentration on, say, wet labs or on hardware manufacturing capabilities, the ability to do prototyping, and in a hardware facility you'd have a lot of equipment for everything from soldering to wave soldering to doing PCB board layouts and populating things automatically, and 3D printing, fancy 3D printers for printing different types of materials, et cetera, and cutting materials, et cetera. So there's millions of dollars in some accelerators that they spend on building an infrastructure for the startups to be able to leverage. And other accelerators may be sort of general purpose accelerators that just have desks and you're working on the business plan and trying to get financing. So you have to look at what is necessary for your business and what is valuable, and the community around that's valuable. So if you're doing things in life sciences, say, and you want to have other entrepreneurs who are also in life sciences who you can learn more from, as well as the expertise of those teams, then those are the accelerators that you probably go to. And there are many different types of accelerators. SOSV runs some deep tech accelerators in hardware and life sciences, but there are accelerators which are even corporate accelerators, or even like hospital-based accelerators that are just about getting your devices into clinical use, and some of these things you pay for, or not pay for, they pay you money. Some they don't pay you or give you any money, but they give you access to a community. Some they get equity, some they don't get equity. So there's a lot of different programs that are out there that achieve different things. But the main things as an entrepreneur that you would be looking for is, does that introduce me to a community of customers that is of interest to me? Does that introduce me to a community of investors that is of interest to me? does that introduce me to a community of like-minded founders that are going to be, and I think this is one of the most critical things, that community of founders that are also at the same stage that you're at. They're likely to be at the same stage that you're at through multiple, years of your evolution. And they're getting their first, the first seed round, getting their first Series A investors, getting their first corporate sales, and by actually having a group of, say, 10 or 20 other co-founders of different companies that you're rooming with effectively when you're in an accelerator, you benefit from the community's knowledge, and then you benefit from that ongoing community that happens long after the 3 or 6 months of the physical presence of the accelerator is over.
I think one of the steeper learning curves that is part of going through the accelerator experience is getting a sense of the timing for how investor deal making works. And that's where the time when it's right to raise funds, and then that's going to be actually kind of a smallish window of time that you need to work with. And then once you get your lead investor, then there's another small window of time where you can bring on follow-on investors. And then navigating that and getting a good handle of uh, how to do that, how to bring on these followers, uh, it's a challenge. It's not super intuitive. I think I did this really well in actually our second round of fundraising, where we had more of an angel network that led the round. And then of course we had associates just follow that round. And then we had another, I think 15 or so angel investors that also joined. And that clicked super nicely, because it was we got the lead, I had all these followers ready to go. And then we all closed together. But getting to know where those times happen, and what's possible, even to how you can build out your round, so that that's how you build it, a really beautiful round of fundraising, is that you get all these pieces in the right time, in the right place, and then things close. And that's what I think is elegant, and one of the challenges that I think I face.
I've seen good attitudes. Those are essentially the people that are trying to leverage all the resources that is surrounding them from day one. That's been very, very consistent, of people reaching out and people just going around, what's available and making the best out of it, and moving forward. A wrong attitude would be, not to do that. Is problematic when you are just sitting in your corner and somehow think that the world is against you, and nobody is really here to help you, or whatever, you have setbacks. It doesn't help, really. Building a startup takes a village, and you won't be able to do it on your own. That's a given for any kind of startup, whether it's software, hardware, life sciences, whatever. And so being communicative, and maybe over communicative is okay. That's perfectly fine. Being resourceful, and be positive, because what's the point? If you're building a company and you don't really believe in it, or you are frustrated with it, the frustration has to fuel the envy of being successful, but just not wear you down. It's I understand it's difficult, but you have to keep faith in you and the other people, and that things will turn all right every single day.
If a startup is getting investment, there's something that has to happen before that happens, right? So why is a startup getting investment? You have to look at the reason for what is the purpose for the investment, and what are they trying to get out of it. So whenever you're receiving an investment, you're making promises to an investor that you're going to deliver value to them, and that you're making a promise, whether it's to your family and friends, like most people as they're getting started, their first source of investment is actually from people that they've known for a really long time. You're not going to go start your company and immediately get capital from a venture capitalist. That's many people who are starting businesses think that that's how you actually get your money. That's not actually how you get your money. Your first money is from your friends and your family, and and people maybe by friends, maybe people that you've worked with before, bosses that you've had, or for different companies who really believe in what you're doing. So those sort of personal acquaintances, they're the first money that goes into your business traditionally. And so when you make a promise to them about your what you're doing when you receive an investment is you're making a promise, and you have to keep your promises to your investors and your family and your friends, or a financial investor. And what that promise says is you're buying a piece of me, a piece of my company, and in exchange for that, I'm going to make it worth more money in the future. So the question, is what's, why do you think that that's possible, right? So, like, it's kind of preposterous to say you can sell one share of 1 million shares and price it at, I don't know, $10 or something, or $1, and to think that the company will be worth more than $1 million or $10 million in a year's time, unless you have some sort of way of valuing what the business is and what it's doing. But you have to be able to, when you sell those shares in a company, know that the next step over the next year, or however long that money takes you, and generally you want to be raising enough money for a year or 18 months when you're raising capital. Maybe not from family and friends, maybe it's only 6 months or 4 months or whatever, but you want to be raising enough capital to get to another inflection point, that if they invest in you, or your friends and family is investing in you, and the valuation of your business at that point was $1 million, and you give up 1% of your company for $10,000, so they, your friends and family, don't make the rent payments, or they don't eat food for 2 months, and they give you some money, all of them combined, and they give you $10,000. You've given away 1% of your company. And in a year's time, they're going to be hungry. They're going to have lost some weight because they didn't spend the money on food. What'll happen is, you have to actually say, okay, the company is going to be worth $2 million, or what, some appreciation of value, or $1.5 million, or $15 million if you started at 10. So how do you actually get that appreciation? Well, there needs to be an inflection point in what you've done over that period of time. So a lot of people look at the mechanics of, how do you get an investment? Well, to look at the mechanics of how you get investment, you have to look at the underlying value first. You have to look at what's the fundamental value of the entire enterprise, and what could it be? And most of that is hope. You're selling hope as to what the future potential is, because $1 million can still buy you a nice house in the United States. And so for you to come up with an idea and say, this idea is worth $1 million, a lot of people would rather just buy $1 million house, because it's practical and you can live in it and you can charge rent for it or something. Why should they be valuing your idea that you just came up with 3 weeks ago, or whatever, at $1 million valuation, or $3 million valuation even, whatever. So it's because they're ascribing a lot of hope, and they're ascribing the hard work that you and the other founders and the team that you get around you are going to create something that's worth, something really substantial. And so, like, when you are raising capital, you raise that capital for a purpose. You raise it you recognize that the hope that exists right now has at the formation point of your business is all hope and no reality. And so when you try to de-risk the company for future investment, you're saying, okay, we're going to take the $10,000 or the $20,000, and we're going to create, a situation where there's less hope, but a lot, or a significant amount of hope still in the future, but a real value in what we're doing that makes it less risky. I mean, it is the nature of a good entrepreneur to be constantly listening to advice from mentors and from the customers, et cetera. What will happen is you have to sort out the things which are, everybody has a different set of glasses when they look at the world, and they have a different color on those glasses. And so often you'll receive advice which is focused around a given rose tinted color of the world, where perhaps they're seeing only things from the science side, or they're seeing only things from their customer point of view and no other customer points of view. And so you have to actually be using the true north of your company and your mission, the actual direction that you have established and your founding team has agreed on, the thing that you're trying to serve, as a filter for the advice you're receiving in the first place. So you often receive bad advice from people that doesn't apply to you at this time, because they're not applying the same filters that your business needs to be successful. Now, you also need to adjust your view of the world based off of the advice you're hearing, because that wisdom that you're hearing from people who've been through 20 years of fighting in the world to try to make a difference often will relate to what you're saying. So it falls on the founder to actually sort of sort the good advice from the bad advice. A piece of bad advice you could get could be, for example, oh, you should get in somebody super experienced to run the company, and I've gotten that advice, and I've done that advice, and even when you're given a lot more money, a lot of the times, the quicker that advice comes, right? So you're given like millions and millions of dollars. And so at that point, the investors need to know that there's a senior management team that can manage that millions of dollars. So what's better in some ways to do as a startup founder is to prove that you can manage the money and prove that you can manage the growth as the senior leader of the team by taking something from nothing and building it to something. And by making that progress, the investors will have a lot more confidence and trust in you, and they'll have more trust in your team and the things that the team has done together. So you won't necessarily need to replace really great co-founders who are leading a marketing and sales function with some great sales and marketing person, but who will require a much heavier salary and a much heavier set of demands and standards as to how they travel, or how they which hotels they stay at, et cetera. You and your co-founders can continue to bunk in two to a room or whatever, or when you go to a town, Laszlo was famous, who's at MapInfo, because he had ex-girlfriends in nearly every city in the United States. So he would just sort of catch up with some friends when he was in a given city. So and that would save us on the hotel bills. But what you have to do as a startup to get a little further is to maximize your capital. What comes in with later stage capital is they're going to be trying to maximize the time, and they think that the best way to do that is by getting people that have already done it. And sometimes that's absolutely true, and sometimes it's absolutely false. So you just have to be careful with those decisions, because sometimes you'll end up with making some errors by listening to your esteemed venture backers.
You know, you lost soccer games when you were young, but you know, you still got to go to the whatever fish and chips place after the game, and people still loved you, and the world didn't end. And then you know, at some later point, you ask someone on a date and they reject you, but the world didn't end. And you apply to a university and you don't get in, and the world doesn't end. And you've tried things and you've done things and you get rejected, and the world doesn't end. I'm still here. And it's important to understand that, like, it gets harder and harder the higher the stakes. It feels very high stakes to say, be in a meeting with a VC. It's very important to sort of destigmatize it and just realize what's happening here is all that's ever happened. If it doesn't work out, the world isn't going to end. And if you can, and I have lost, and I've lost, and I've lost, and I've made mistake, and the world didn't end, and I'm still here. And if this meeting doesn't go well, I'm still here. And to some extent, desensitize it